Alright, hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you make the most out of your choices. So, today, I am going to be covering all 3 of the White Mage subclasses from the 5th edition D&D Cross Final Fantasy XIV Characters and Races Compendium. If you didn't catch my video on Monday, that's where I did the main class of the White Mage, and this is going to just be all 3 of the subclasses. As I mentioned before in the Monday video, the base version of the White Mage, not only does it not work, but the defining feature of the White Mage actually has a negative impact on action economy, meaning it costs you more actions than every other class to do things as a White Mage. So any team with a White Mage on their side is going to be at a disadvantage, because in 5th edition, action economy is really important. It's the main kind of defining feature or deciding feature about balance in combat encounters, is effectively which side has more actions that they can do, or more potent actions they can do. So I made a suggestion. First of all, the mechanic itself was overly complicated about how you got them. And then again, you had to use a bonus action just to get your limited resource. The bonus action did nothing but give you a limited resource. So you had to sacrifice that so that later on you could do something else with that bonus action that you sacrificed before. That's how you lose actions. I made it much more simple. You have a limited number, just like every other limited resource in the game. You have a limited number. It's tied to your proficiency bonus, and use a bonus action to enact prayers, and each prayer empowers a certain kind of spell. And I give 2 examples of prayers for the base class. Each subclass will have their own prayers that interact with their stuff. Unfortunately, as I have said before, I am exhausted. I've gotten to the point now where I am almost impressed with how exhausted I am. I can barely keep my eyes open a lot of the time, but I can't sleep at all because I'm so tired that I'm too tired to sleep. It is the weirdest thing. And from a creative standpoint, actually running all the new RPGs that I'm doing for Daily December is really taxing me creatively. So I've got nothing left in my tank creatively. So normally when I do these, I will give suggestions on how I think things could get rebalanced and things like that. Like I said, the White Mage class needs a full redesign. And I have done that with other classes. And I technically did it with the White Mage itself. But I don't have the ability to do that. So I'm going to go over the 3 different subclasses. I'm going to go over their abilities, talk about the things that don't work about them, and then give a just broad suggestion of, I think the prayers for this subclass should focus on this kind of spell or something like that. And that's going to have to do it for this. I would love to put more effort in this, but to be blunt, I'm exhausted at this point, and the amount of work I've put into this. I've been making 2 videos a week about this for like 6 months now, so I am running on empty. But let's dive into this. So, first subclass is called the Elementalist. Now, the weird thing about this class, and technically the White Mage in Final Fantasy XIV, is you don't start as a White Mage, and that goes way back to the original version of Final Fantasy XIV before it went into A Realm Reborn, and it was carried over to A Realm Reborn, where you had classes that you picked when you started, and then you had jobs, which eventually the classes would upgrade into. And the old version was actually really interesting, but kind of pointless. The new version is just each class eventually turns into a job, and then as you earn more jobs, they don't have a base class you go through, they just start as jobs. So for the White Mage, I believe the base class is the Conjurer. And the lore behind it is because it starts in Gridania. And Gridania is this really cool, for lack of a better term, it's an elf city. From any other fantasy setting, it's built in this super lush forest. It's all the buildings are made out of trees. Like it's a really pretty place. And the whole story behind Gridania is they have agreements with the elementals of the area that they kind of respect each other and they protect each other and work together in harmony. And so it's a very kind of nature-based settlement, and the conjurers are kind of the personification of that. So the first subclass is called the Elementalist, which for someone thinking just about white mages doesn't make sense as far as the broader Final Fantasy, because white mages don't get access to any elemental spells ever in any Final Fantasy. That's not something they do. That's a black mage thing. However, when you look at it from a Final Fantasy XIV standpoint, it does kind of make more sense, because again, they have this huge connection to the elementals. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's a way to look at the class that I wouldn't have thought of, mostly because I've never played a white mage, and I only recently learned about the lore behind them due to actually some stuff that is referenced in Endwalker and doing my research for this. So that being said, the Elementalist, well, let's just dive into it. So each subclass has an expanded spell list. I mentioned before for the White Mage that their spell list is extremely limited in the idea that the almost only offensive spells that they get are summoning spells, which to me don't make a ton of sense. And it feels like the class was built around the idea of I will summon something and then I spend the rest of my time just healing all my allies, which isn't fun. In a tabletop RPG. It's fine in an MMO, it's not in a tabletop RPG. So I recommended, hey, add a few more offensive spells to the base class, and then the subclasses can kind of specialize in a certain type of offensive spell. And that's what the expanded spell list for the Elementalist is. Spoiler alert, they're all elemental spells. Earth Tremor, Thunder Wave, which Thunder Wave is weird because Thunder Wave is not elemental in any way, shape, or form. I don't really know why it's there. It's a really useful spell, don't get me wrong. But it does thunder damage, which is sound damage. It has nothing to do with elemental anything. It is sonic damage. Which I guess if you wanted to call it, because there is no air damage in this, if you wanted to call it air damage, because in Final Fantasy air is an element, I guess you could call it that, so maybe that's what it's meant to. Then you get Earthbind, Maximilian's Earth and Grath, Erupting Earth, Melts Minute Meteors, Stone Skin, Watery Sphere, Conjure Elemental, and Control Wind. So for the most part, there's a lot of Earth in there. And then eventually it turns, it adds a little bit of Fire, Water, and Wind. Which are the four basic elements of Final Fantasy are Fire, Earth, Water, Wind. So it kind of makes sense. I don't really have a problem with any of the spells there. They all kind of make sense. So moving on, at level 2, when you choose it, you get Elemental Blessing. Beginning at 2nd level, as an action you may expend Confession charges. Confession was that really broken thing? Yeah, okay. To bless a weapon within 30 feet of you that you can see with elemental power for a number of rounds equal to your wisdom modifier. Number of charge you spend increases the effectiveness of your blessing. So this was why they wanted that real convoluted way to earn extra charges, because you could use extra charges to do more things. But that just meant that you were burning more actions for less features. And Elemental Blessing is a spell already. The spell itself is called Elemental Weapon, and everything you can do for Elemental Blessing, Elemental Weapon lets you do, I believe at level 2. It might be a level 3 spell. Before I say the exact wrong thing, I'm actually going to look it up. Come on, there. Dear Lord. Come on. Elemental weapon. It's a 3rd level spell, so I was off. So it's a 3rd level spell, which you don't have access to at 2nd level. You don't get those until 5th. And effectively, it gives the weapon a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls. It deals an extra D4 of damage of a damage type, and that's what Elemental Weapon does. This lets you change the damage type of the weapon to Cold, Radiant, or Thunder. Again, I don't know why they're using, I guess, again, Wind. And they're weird elements, too, because I don't know why they wouldn't have Fire. They have Cold, they don't have Fire. Radiant, I don't quite understand that. And Thunder is Sonic. So I don't know why they don't have... I guess Earth doesn't exist in D&D. So that would be Bludgeoning, which you can already do. So the first thing, you get to change the damage type. Second one, it gets a +1 bonus to attack rolls. The 3rd level, the weapon's damage roll deal bonus damage equal to your proficiency bonus. So again, it is a less powerful version of a spell, and Confession just allows you to cast more spells. This is why I said it was broken before. You are now trying to give them extra spells by forcing them to burn extra actions to do it. It is both, it is unbalancing on both sides. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't need to be. And again, Elemental Weapon is just better because the D4 will actually, on a crit, will actually double, whereas Elemental Blessing won't. And if you cast Elemental Weapon at higher levels, you get multiple D4s and you get higher increases to the attack and damage rolls. Whereas this, really, Elemental Blessing becomes more and more useless the higher your level. Once you get into Tier 3, Elemental Blessing is pointless. There's no reason to ever use it. That being said, I will, at the end of each subclass, I will talk about what I think the new prayers should focus on. So, yes, that is Elemental Blessing. Just not useful in any way, shape, or form. At 6th level, you go to Eyes of the Elemental. You gain a mental map of an area of a 2-mile radius centered on you. You must spend 15 minutes meditating while elementals share this information about the surrounding area with you. You may only commune with elementals in this way once. Your ability to do so refreshing after a long rest. Also, you can see normally in darkness, both magical and non-magical, to a distance of 120 feet. This is problematic on a number of ways. First of all, the first half is a very situational ability. It gives you a map of an area, which is useful somewhat. It's not incredibly useful, but from a role-playing perspective, being able to talk with the elementals and ask them to basically give you a map, there's a lot of potential there. It's a one-and-done ability. That's not cool. There's really not a whole lot, especially since it takes 15 minutes to do. There's really not a whole lot there that could be abused by players doing it over and over and over again, especially since traveling 2 miles in D&D is going to take you hours. So it's not like this is something I could still see it being limited, but not to once per day. Like something closer to tie it to, even tying it to your proficiency bonus feels bad. I would say give it like 3 or 4. You can do 3 or 4 a day. Pick one that you like better. The second one, that's a warlock ability. It's called Devil's Sight. It is an extremely powerful warlock ability that this one just gets for free. The thing with the warlock ability, it's an Eldritch Invocation, meaning in order to get that, you have to choose that over other things. So there's actually a price to be paid. This is just free being able to see in magical darkness, which is incredibly broken. Eldritch Sight is almost broken. And like I said, the fact that it requires you to take 2 levels in Warlock is the one kind of saving grace of it. To the point where it's not really broken. It's just extremely useful for certain builds. This doesn't. And I don't understand why you can see in Magical Darkness. It makes no sense whatsoever. I guess it says Eyes of the Elemental, and Elementals can somehow see in Magical Darkness. They can't, but somehow these can. I don't. Again, this feels like, well, the first ability they limited. They're like, well, for 6th level, we have to give them more than a one-and-done ability. Okay, let's just give them Devil Sight. No, it's just, no. I mean, yeah, it's a 6th level ability compared to Devil Sight you can get at 2nd level. But I don't understand the second half of this. I say get rid of the second half, just give them the Eyes of the Elemental. Or if you do want to give them something, just give them improved Dark Vision. Effectively, they have Dark Vision up to 120 feet instead of just 60 feet. But don't give them the ability to see in Magical Darkness, because that is a huge thing, especially at low levels. Yeah. Moving to 10th level, you get Elemental Armor. As an action, you may spend 1 Confession charge to grant a creature you touch the Elemental's protection. The creature gains resistance to one of the following elements: Cold, Radiant, or Thunder for a number of rounds equal to your Wisdom modifier. I still don't understand why they don't do fire damage. Like, if you are an Elemental and fire is one of the 4 elements in Final Fantasy, I'm not understanding why, other than the fact that fire is probably the most common. Fire and lightning damage are the 2 most common elemental types as far as attack spells are concerned. They're tons and tons and tons and tons of them. So this is both useless and overpowered. Granting resistance is really powerful, especially when that resistance lasts for multiple rounds. Again, by 10th level, you have, because Wisdom is your spellcasting modifier, you have a 20 Wisdom. It's just how it works. So you get 5 rounds. There's effectively the entirety of combat for a single confession charge. For the entirety of combat, somebody has resistance to a limited number of things. This is also a spell. Stone Skin gives resistance to weapon attacks, basically. So this is a modified version of Stone Skin. Stone Skin is a 4th level spell. This gives White Mages effectively a more useful version of Stone Skin. A more useful version of a 4th level spell, because this can actually go against different damage types, whereas Stone Skin is only effective against weapon. So I guess it's not even a more useful version. It's just a different version of Stone Skin. So it's congratulations. For an extremely low amount, they can cast Stone Skin for free. They never have to use a spell slot for this, but they do have to sacrifice multiple actions in order to do it. So no way to really fix that one. It's just no. Nuh-uh. Finally, at 14th level, you get Ethereal Conjuration. As a bonus action, you may spend a number of confession charges to borrow power from the elements to cast a spell. You may cast a spell whose level is equal to half the number of confession charges spent, rounded up. Free spellcasting, everybody! Free spellcasting! Again, there's no way to fix that. If you're going to have a full caster, you don't need to give them the ability to cast even more spells. Technically, that is a defining feature of the Wizard. The Wizard has the ability to regain spell slots on a short rest, Arcane Recovery. It's also a feature for the Circle of the Land Druid, because they're meant to be kind of a natural wizard. This gives you significantly more spells than either of those 2 abilities, because they're severely limited. So yeah. So as far as the Elementalist, if we were to use the prayer system, which basically use a bonus action to augment a spell, what kind of spells would I like to see the Elementalist do? Well, one prayer that could be useful, and it's something I've actually kicked around as an idea for a feat, for a dual wand wielding feat. That I haven't quite figured out how to balance yet, but it could be cool for one of the prayers to be able to split the damage of a single spell between two targets. So it would need to be single target damaging spells, but you could effectively split the damage between two targets. As far as how that deals with the Elementalist, I don't know, but the Elementalist is a little bit more of an aggressive fighter kind of thing. I thought about being able to change the damage type in addition to that, which I don't think would be a huge thing, but it just, for the fact that you have to burn a bonus action to do it, it didn't feel quite powerful. I guess, you know, change a single damage type and split the damage between two things could be something that's interesting. Having something more defensive to go with your healing spells, so where if you do something, if you heal someone, you can add a prayer to the heal that will give them resistance. Not for all of combat, but maybe for the next attack that hits them, or something not quite as broken as for the rest of combat. You have this, or again, because this is a little bit more offensive, perhaps when you heal something, you could put a shield on them, somewhat similar to like a Armor of Agathis, where anytime somebody attacks them, they take a certain amount of damage. The next time they get hit by a damaging attack, or the next time they take damage, whatever creature caused that damage takes a certain amount of damage. Kind of working along the same line as the heal over time prayer. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of the Elementals. Make it themed around elementals, changing elemental types and stuff like that. So, yeah. Next up is the Spirit Master. Spirit Master is your traditional healer. When you look at their expended spell list, are all buff spells. Heroism, Sanctuary, Enhance Ability, Protection from Poison, Beacon of Hope, Revivify, going all the way up to Assize and Asylum. Regen is one. I'm assuming Regen is one of the new spells for this. So yeah, this is your healer. So at second level, you get Soothsayer. Your healing spells are more effective. Whenever you cast a spell at first level higher to restore hit points to a creature, the creature gains additional hit points equal to a proficiency bonus plus the spell's level. I don't really have a problem with that. Just having a base ability that adds additional healing. Again, one of the issues with healing in 5th edition is, in general, the higher your level you get, the less effective your healing becomes. You start getting some really potent heals every so often, but a lot of times it just doesn't pay to heal your friends over doing damage and taking out enemies. So giving something that just gives a small boost, it doesn't need to be a massive one, but a small one with it linked to the proficiency bonus and the spells level, it actually means that it scales relatively well as you go up higher in levels. It's still not going to be super great for super high, like 6th, 7th, and 8th level spells. It's still going to be a very paltry amount. But you know, every little bit helps. So yeah, I have no problem with that. I think it's very nice. Yeah. Going to 6th level, you get Medicine Master. You gain proficiency in the medicine skill. You have advantage on wisdom medicine checks to stabilize creatures and when diagnosing diseases. This is another one that is a good ability. Just flat out, this is an interesting ability. Gives you proficiency in a skill. That's always nice. I would put just an addendum in there of if you already have proficiency, you can gain proficiency in one other skill. Simply because this is a wisdom-based class, a lot of people are going to take medicine when they start the class, and then this becomes useless. So that would be the only thing I would change, is add in, if you already have medicine, you get training in one other skill. Because that's what it effectively would turn into if someone was planning on becoming a Spirit Master, is they just wouldn't choose medicine because they would get it at 6th level anyway. And then advantage on checks to stabilize a creature. Most people do not use medicine checks to stabilize. And I think... I don't really see this class doing that either, because they're a healer. So that on its own is not super useful, but when diagnosing diseases, that makes it a little bit more useful. So yeah, I guess I could see them, especially only at 6th level, stabilizing a creature instead of healing them might make sense in quite a few different situations. So yeah, overall, effectively, to stabilize, you generally only have to roll a 10 or higher. So adding on advantage to it effectively means you only need to roll like a 7 or higher to do it. So generally, you're going, and then that's without your medicine check. So it effectively means anytime you try to stabilize someone, you're going to stabilize them, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, and if you combine it with any feats, like there's a healer feat, that would make it even more useful. So yeah, overall, like I said, not a horrible thing. It's interesting. It has some uses. It's limited to a point. It's okay. Going to 10th level, you get Clerical Smite. When you cast a healing spell, you may spend a confession charge to weaponize the spell, dealing radiant damage instead of healing. The spell must require a die roll to be used in this way. The bonus healing that would be applied from Soothsayer is applied as bonus damage. Targeting creature makes a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC, taking the spell's healing as damage on a failure and half as much on success. So this effectively turns your healing spells into attack spells. The issue with this is Cure Wounds already has an attack version, which is Inflict Wounds. It does necrotic instead of radiant damage, but that's the only difference. So it would be pointless to use this on that, other than the fact that you get to use your Soothsayer bonus. So it does slightly better damage. But again, you have to waste a bunch of actions to do it. As you get to higher levels, basically things like Cure, Mass Cure Wounds, or Mass Healing Word, or Healing Word, they simply don't do enough damage where Clerical Smite would ever be useful. The really good healing spells just give you health. They give you 70 hit points, or like Power Word Heal lets you just give out 700 hit points to anyone you want. Clerical Smite wouldn't work with them because there's no die rolls. So Clerical Smite is an interesting idea that is useless. Because the one spell you might use it on, which is Cure Wounds, already has a damaging version that you have access to as a White Mage. So the only difference with this is it's radiant instead of that, and you do a slightly larger amount of damage. Proficiency bonus plus the spell's level. So for a max level spell at 20th level, you are looking at an additional 15 damage. For a 9th level Cure Wounds, an additional 15 damage, which isn't that useful. And you can do a lot better damage with just attacking spells. There's a bunch of different things. Your cantrips are almost going to be on par with the amount of damage you would be doing a Clerical Smite by just turning Cure Wounds into Cause Wounds. So yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's just not useful. And the limitations they put on it are good limitations, because if you could Power Word Heal with Clerical Smite, that means it's more powerful than Power Word Kill. Because Power Word Kill kills anything with less than 100 hit points. Power Word Heal, if you were to turn that into an offensive spell, lets you do 700 damage to anyone you want. It would be massively overpowered. So, yeah, Clerical Smite, interesting idea. It just doesn't work. Finally, at 14th level, you get Touch of the Padjal, which you mentioned before, and I wasn't sure what it is. Basically, as a bonus action, you may spend a Confession charge. When you cast your next spell, which restores hit points, when you normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points of the spell, you instead use the highest number possible for each die. You max out your healing. For a single Confession charge, it's massively broken. Absolutely massively broken. Despite the fact that you still have to burn additional actions to be able to pull it off. This is just, wow. Really, really not cool. I do like the idea of being able to maximize your heals. It was actually in D&D Next, one of the versions well before it turned into what 5e is now. One of the versions of the cleric, you could take a kind of customization for the cleric that made all of their healings maximized. And they took it out because it didn't work. It unbalanced the class to the point where that was the only way you could really get really effective heals, and it would unbalance. Low levels, it would unbalance the game unbelievably. And once you got to high levels, where most of the healing spells were just straight up, let me give you hit points, it was useless. So that's the issue with the Touch of Padjal, is the fact that, yeah, if you can maximize it at low levels, it's super powered. At 14th level, when you would get it, it's just not useful because the healing spells you'll be using at that point just give out hit points. So, yeah, again, it's an interesting idea, just not very useful. For prayers for the Spirit Master. I really like the idea of Clerical Smite. It feels like a prayer from the idea that that we made up of the prayers. It feels like it would work. It just, there needs to be something. There's just not enough healing spells in 5th edition that it would actually be useful for. So I would say for to make things crazy and to just give a benefit to a lot of different spells, I think one of the prayers should be your healing dice explode. If you're not familiar with the idea of exploding dice, basically if you roll the maximum number on a die, you get to keep that number and then roll it again and add it. So on a d6, if you rolled a 6, you get to keep the 6 and roll again. If you got a 3 the next time, well then you rolled a 9 on that d6. Exploding dice can create a lot of chaos, but personally I find it fun in a limited capacity. So having a prayer that lets your healing spells explode does mean upcasting Cure Wounds and upcasting Healing Word turn into really, really potent spells, because every single die that you roll has another chance to explode. So the more dice you roll, the more chance you have of at least one of them exploding and giving you additional healing. I like that. It's fun. I don't find it as super unbalancing because, again, again, healing is not the greatest in 5th edition already, so giving a little bit of extra help without just doing the automatic, you get the max number heals, that's a little bit broken when you're talking low levels, and then useless to high levels. This one, no matter what level it's going to be, it's going to be useful, because if you upcast a Cure Wound or a heal, a Healing Word, or you cast Mass Healing Word or Mass Cure Wounds, the more dice you roll, the better chance the prayer is going to have at least some of them explode. So yeah, that's what I think one of this one of the dice could be, or one of the prayers could be. As far as for like a second prayer, because I see every subclass having 2 prayers that they give you access to 2. I have no idea what the second prayer would be, but if you guys have any ideas for a Spirit Master prayer, Something preferably that would have an offensive, or something that would do something for offense. One of the ideas I had was maybe making your healing spells actually hurt enemies while you heal, or something like that. Like a portion of the hit points you heal, you would effectively steal from someone else. Something like that might be interesting or cool, just so you could have some sort of offensive ability as this, because again, it gets really boring when you're not. But all those things would need to be dealt with. So anyway, that's the Spirit Master. Finally, we go to the Amdapori. Again, Amdapor is a city from, I can't remember which era it was. I believe it was after the Allegans. But anyway, it was a city of mages, and there's two different dungeons that go through there. Both of them are cool. But basically, if I remember correctly, the Amdapori were messing with magic that they shouldn't have, and I believe they were dealing with void scent, which are demons, effectively. They were summoning demons, I think. So they're naughty mages, and that's what they kind of do. This is going to be much more offensive spells for this. So first things first, the expended spell list. Banish, Bless, Moonbeam, Sleep. Moonbeam is a super fun spell that is normally Druid exclusive, but effectively it lets you bring down this beam of light that does damage when characters either enter it on their turn or start their turn in it. And the cool thing about it is if the creature is changed in any way, like polymorph or a druid wild shape or something like that, they fail their save on it, they revert back to their form. So it's really cool for stuff like that. Daylight, Spirit Guardians, Banishment, Wall of Fire, Holy, and Hallow. I believe Holy is another one of the new spells for this. Holy in normal Final Fantasy is the most powerful white magic spell, and it does crazy damage. So I would assume that's what it does here. So, beginning at second level, the first thing that you get is Afflatus Misery. This is the ability that uses your Blood Lily in Final Fantasy XIV. What it does in D&D is, as an action, you may spend any number of confession charges to make a ranged spell attack against a creature within 60 feet of you. Your attack deals a number of d6 plus your proficiency bonus radiant damage, where number is equal to the number of confession charges spent. This is a cantrip. This is a worse cantrip. So in order to use this at all, you have to use a bonus action to get at least one confession charge. Then you use your action to cast it to do a single d6 of damage. If you cast, what is it, Radiant Flame or something like that? The basic cleric cantrip. For the life of me, I can't remember what it's called. Come on. Radiant Flame, I think. Oh, what is it called? Like I said, guys, I am so exhausted right now that I cannot... Sacred Flame, there we go. Sacred Flame. Sacred Flame is a cantrip. It also takes an action. At first level, they make a dex save or take a d8 of radiant damage. By 5th level, they do 2d8. So from first level, Sacred Flame is always going to be more useful than Afflatus Misery. Because Sacred Flame only takes an action, Afflatus Misery requires at least one bonus action plus that. And it does less damage. If you do something like Toll the Dead, that does a d12 of damage. Now, the big difference is Afflatus Misery does take an attack roll versus those are saving throws. So theoretically, Afflatus Misery could crit. That is the only thing it has going for it, and it's such a low amount of damage, there's no reason to ever use this ability. It is just a waste of actions. Moving to 6th level, Inquisitor's Report. Beginning at 6th level, you may spend 15 minutes communing with the elementals to learn the location of any undead or fiend creatures within a 1-mile radius. You may do this. You may only to do this once before your ability to do so refreshing after a long rest. That is very poorly worded. Another one and done ability. This one lets you see undead or fiend creatures. The Paladins have a similar ability, but they get multiple uses of it. Rangers have an ability that's almost identical to this, though it only finds, I think, dragons or elementals or something like that. They're not useful in game. They just really aren't. Especially since this takes 15 minutes to do. This is not like a battle ability that you could use. I'm not a huge fan of anything that lets you find a specific creature type if it's going to take you, a minute is 10 rounds of combat. 10 minutes is 100 rounds of combat. 15 minutes is 150 rounds of combat just to figure out where undead or fiend creatures are within a mile radius. Now, it does mean you can go a mile down, so that's kind of interesting. But there's really just not a whole lot to do. And if we really are going to kind of lean into the demon summoning of effectively the void sense stuff, I would almost rather see them do devils and fiends instead of undead and fiends. And even then, it's just not useful. And definitely should not be a one and done. Make this another 3 or 4 a day. There's no reason. You could even leave that one unlimited because of how little information it's going to give you. You could leave that unlimited almost because it takes 15 minutes to do. Going to 10th level, we have Aura of Amdapor. Amdapor. Well, I'm never going to pronounce that name right. When you hold a confession charge in your body, you emit an aura in a 10-foot radius that protects you and friendly creatures. While within your aura, creatures have resistance to necrotic damage, and when they are the target of a spell which restores hit points, they recover additional hit points equal to your wisdom modifier. This is actually kind of an interesting ability that is a paladin ability. Paladins use auras a lot. And it's something that has been linked to the Paladins since, I know, 3rd edition. It might have been part of the 2nd edition Paladin. I'm not sure. But they have this thing where they can give you auras. And even in 5th edition, they have quite a few different auras that they could give. So this is a Paladin ability being given to a White Mage, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And again, it's linked to the confession. So this one even tells you that you don't want to use your... So this... Not only do you have to burn actions to get confession, now, in order for this to ever be useful, you can't ever use all your confession charges because then the aura goes away. So, yeah, overall, just... Finally, at 14th level, you get Voidbane. And as a bonus action, you may spend 1 confession charge to empower your next spell. If the target of your spell is an undead or fiend creature, it becomes far more effective. If your spell requires you to make a spell attack roll, you gain advantage. If it requires the creature to make a saving throw, they do so at disadvantage. Additionally, your spell deals bonus damage on hit equal to your proficiency bonus. So, first things first, bonus damage on hits requires an attack roll, just because that's how the things work. If you fail a save, it doesn't count as a creature hitting you. So that's just it's just a wording thing. You could just say deals bonus damage equal to your proficiency bonus without the on hit, because that creates some weird issues. Other than that, this kind of is a prayer. Like, this fits the idea of a prayer, where it costs a bonus action and empowers a spell. It's extremely limited, where it's undead or fiend. One of the big issues with the ranger features in the base PHB was, and this has been an issue with rangers for a long time. They will get their I can't remember what they're called. Their prey. Excuse me. Rangers hunt specific creatures. I can't remember what it's called right now. Again, my mind is leaving me. But what would happen is you would choose those at certain levels, and it would only be like you get a maximum of 3 of those through your entire career. If those 3 kinds of creatures are not ones that you're constantly fighting, all the abilities that relate to that are useless. And that's the issue with... Excuse me. Wow. Something didn't down the wrong tube. That's the issue with Voidbane. If you're not fighting undead or fiend creatures, this is a completely useless ability. And while, yeah, undead and fiend creatures are fun to fight, there are tons of other ones. And for a 14th level ability, having only 2 creature types that it ever works on is really, really limited. So, what kind of prayers would I like to see for the Amdapori? If we are going to this actually might be a lot of fun. If we're going to deal with the idea of them, the way that summoning Void Scent in Final Fantasy XIV lore works is you actually create a portal to a different reflection, basically a different reality. And it's called the Void because long time ago, darkness got so powerful that of the 6 elemental powers you have in Final Fantasy XIV, you have Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, Light, and Dark. Those are your 6 elements. For that one, the Dark element got so powerful that it took over the entire crystal. It took over the entire world. And so everyone there was turned into these things called Void Scent, and they call it the Void. And so summoning Void Scent and things like that requires you opening a portal to the Void. So I think it might be really cool to have 2 spells that would actually create a place on the map that creates some sort of rift that does something. One of them would be more healing benefit, whether it's, people that are within 5 feet of the rift created when you heal a single target will get a regen effect or something. Or for a damaging effect, you create a rift that does damage over time. Things like that. Like those, I think those would be really cool, where you have, when you cast a spell, you can add a prayer to it to make a rift there that does something to the local terrain. I think there's a lot of different ways you could explore that, and it would fit really, really well with the idea of the Amdapori and the fact that they were effectively contacting the Void, which is a different plane of existence, I guess, in D&D would be the best description of it. Yeah, I think that would be really cool. So, final thoughts. Overall, again, the White Mage as written is just a bad class. Of the 3 subclasses, I think the Spirit Master has the most potential to be a working class without too much to fix. Amdapori is just pointless. Most of the abilities are just not useful. You will always have better things that you can use your actions for. Elementalist is on the other side. There are certain things that are somewhat useful, but the fact that you have to burn additional actions to do them is not. Yeah, it's just, there's some potential here. And like I said, if we stick with the prayer system that I mentioned, I think these could turn into really interesting classes. Like I said, the Amdapori one, where it creates little rifts whenever you empower spells, that one to me is the most exciting. Just because it's something that doesn't exist in 5th edition already. There would be a lot of different ways to balance it, so it's not going to be super broken or anything. Or if it was broken, there's so many different things you can use to balance it, making it bigger or smaller, or making the area of effect bigger or smaller, making what happens do more or less, the amount of time it lasts there. Like, there's so many ways to balance it, and it could turn into something really cool. The Elementalist, to me, the Elementalist is kind of boring. I get the lore reason behind it, but to me it's just kind of boring. And then the Spirit Master, yeah, having someone that really specializes in healing, again, could be really cool. Again, for a tabletop RPG, it's not fun to spend all your time healing your allies. It's just not. So you need to have something else in there that gives them the ability to do more than just heal. So that regen effect I mentioned before, for the base class, that gives them the ability to heal and then do other things. So I would say something like that has to be a part of the Spirit Master as well. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, Turn notifications on in the comments down below. Let me know if you've got an idea for a second prayer for the Spirit Master. And again, say nice things about Soren and Rifle Avenger and everyone that has put so much work into this. Because I've really ripped apart the White Mage. And I do that because of the quality of the rest of the product. There's so much amazing stuff here, and this just feels bad that it is just so... it's just not going to work, and it's actively going to make things harder on people. So I'm going to be really hard on it because the rest of this thing is so good, and it's so interesting, and there's so much here. The whole thing, it's over 100 pages of custom-made content. That is so amazing. So say nice stuff about them in the comments. Now, this is my command. Anyway, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.